Interestingly enough, Colorado passed a law, the Colorado Artificial Intelligence Act, that specifically calls out adherence to and compliance with ISO 42001 as being an affirmative defense in certain circumstances if you are alleged to have violated that law. So I thought that was very interesting because we haven't seen that in Europe, but we have seen it in the United States.
We are the Keyboard Samurai, podcast about the business of cyber and tech, here to help you or your business improve. Here's your host, Wil Klu. Let's hack into it now. Hey everybody, welcome back. Another awesome, exciting, kick-ass episode, whatever you want to call it. As always, like, subscribe, all that good YouTube stuff, Spotify stuff, wherever you're listening. Pretty excited today. We're going to chat about AI and cyber, which is always a hot topic and fun. So I brought Walter here. So Walter, why don't you give us the 20 seconds of who you are and why we care, man?
Wil, thank you for having me on. So I'm Walter Haydock. I'm the founder of StackAware. We help AI-powered companies measure and manage cybersecurity, compliance, and privacy risk, primarily through ISO 42001 implementation and readiness. So bottom line, as AI takes over the economy, we are there to help secure it.
Yeah, as AI, that's taking over the economy. I haven't heard that term, but I definitely can see that is the case. I know, like, obviously I use AI every day, and like a lot of us do, but I have some friends and colleagues who are like really smart. Like when they talk, I don't understand what they're saying smart, right? And I've seen some of the stuff that they're able to do, and I'm like, oh man, yeah, this is really it's better than humans sometimes. So I love the topic. It was your idea, so let's just get right into it. We're talking cybersecurity myths and realities. So what's the biggest myth right now?
Specifically with respect to AI, the biggest myth that I've encountered is that software as a service providers are necessarily less secure, and that it's more secure to run a model either on infrastructure as a service or in your own data center.
So interesting. So you're saying well, from an AI perspective, you're saying it's, well, just expound on that, like a little bit more. Like, what do you mean by data center versus cloud, and with AI, like the actual AI, the LLMs, whatnot, or the SaaS technology having AI integrated?
Yeah, so I'll give you a concrete example. On the one hand, you could run generative AI using something like ChatGPT, which is a fully software as a service offering. There's no way to host the latest models from OpenAI on your own infrastructure, and you're basically reliant on OpenAI's security and compliance posture, their contractual representations. Alternatively, you could do something like taking an open source model like Llama, and you could run it on your own computer in your own building using your own power supply, your own cooling, all that type of stuff. And that might be useful in certain circumstances. It might be a good learning experience, but it's not necessarily more secure than relying on that software as a service provider. It really depends on what you're doing and what your threat model it is, but there's no black and white answer.
Right. So is it not more secure because, so like the argument I've always heard from, like, there's companies out there who will host an instance of one of these Gen AI models for you, and specifically for like MSPs and MSSPs that are reselling it, right? And so they're like, oh, it's self-contained, so it's not, you're not just putting it out in there to the ether. Is that where the security misconception is coming from? Because it's self-contained, it doesn't matter, the data can actually leak? Or is it just a matter of like, oh, you're going back to the data center, now you have to worry about all the stuff that you used to have to worry about before the cloud?
Unfortunately, I think there's a lot of FUD out there, and also terminology, lack of clarity. So you mentioned the cloud earlier. The cloud incorporates, in my mind, software as a service. It incorporates infrastructure as a service, which kind of sounds like what you're describing. It incorporates, platform as a service. And a lot of organizations have developed a shorthand that doesn't actually serve them well. So referring to, running something that is on their own AWS subscription as on-prem. Well, it's on someone's prem. It's not on your prem. It's on Amazon Web Services prem. You don't even physically know. You're not technically allowed to even know where that data center is. So I think being clear in terms of exactly what you're talking about with the deployment model and exactly what the risks are is key, because there are risks with running your own hardware, the logistics, the physical security, doing updates, hardware maintenance, all that stuff you got to do on your own. And there are risks with software as a service as well. You got to rely on the provider's representation. You need to operate without perfect visibility of what they're doing, but it's a balancing act. And for a lot of organizations, offloading those responsibilities to another company is probably the right way to go. But again, depends on your situation.
Yeah, I would agree. And I know some people like in that data center space, and I've talked to organizations who cloud was supposed to be really cheaper and easier and faster for us, and now they're considering going back to buying hardware, or at least buying rack space and things like that, because now people have hardware as a service so much, which is it's just a different, I want to say a different version of cloud. It's just a different data center, right? It's just a different pricing model sometimes. So with the security aspect of, say, let's dig into, okay, so the actual AI models themselves, what do we know today, and what do we not know? Because like I'm looking at, I come from the standpoint of, we don't even know what's going to happen with all the data we've been putting in here yet. Like I think there's going to be a fallout at some point, but I don't know what that looks like, because I think we don't necessarily fully understand what could potentially happen. Like, would you agree, or do you think you have some ideas as to like where the risks lie in that whole Gen AI sort of data security aspect of things?
There are two main aspects of data security to focus on when it comes to generative AI. First of all is whether a model is training on your data or not. That is a key question. A second question is, what is the retention of said data, whether or not it's being trained on? So, for example, using the default version of ChatGPT, if you just go to chatgpt.com, start typing things in, you're not logged in, you haven't made any configuration changes, your data is being trained on and indefinitely retained, especially because there's no way to trace it back to you for you to make a request to get rid of it. So that's one side of the equation, so to speak, or one extreme. However, if you have a zero data retention agreement in place with OpenAI and you're using their application programming interface, all the prompts that you're sending to OpenAI and all the responses are being deleted after they're being processed according to OpenAI. Again, you need to rely on representations from the company. And there hasn't been any indications that they're not doing what they said. I will say that a related risk that has surfaced is, in the middle of last year, a court demanded that OpenAI retain millions of conversations related to alleged copyright infringement of New York Times content. And that created a risk of concentration of information, of potential indefinite retention for that data. That is certainly something to think about. So making sure that you have the right representations up front and that you know what your supplier is doing with your data is definitely important.
Yeah, that's that whole idea of, because I think somebody subpoenaed information, right? Like there was a case I thought I saw where somebody subpoenaed somebody's, like, basically it's like their ChatGPT history, kind of thing. So like having that retention on or off could potentially have some legal impacts too, depending on what you're doing with it. Okay, so let's talk about some of the reality. So you're working with organizations a lot on implementing things in a secure manner. What's the kind of what's step one, 1, 2, 3 they have to kind of think about when they're like, all right, I'm going to implement, I don't want to say implement cybersecurity data, but I think that really is the case, because here's the thing, you and I both know, they implemented AI way before they thought about cybersecurity. right? We were all screaming, hey, you need to build governance and train your teams, but they haven't done it. So for organizations out there maybe who have jumped off the deep end at AI and now kind of want to backtrack and look at cybersecurity, like what's the starting things they need to look at?
If you're just getting started with AI governance and security, my recommendations would be to take 3 steps. First of all, do a comprehensive asset inventory to understand all the systems and models that are in use. Once you have that, then you can do a thorough risk assessment of all those systems and models to make sure that they fall within your organization's risk appetite. And then once that's complete, you can apply controls to address any of the risks that you've identified, whether that be avoiding the risk by not using the tool, whether it be transferring the risk by getting some insurance or using indemnification clauses. It could be mitigating the risk through technical controls, through guardrails, things of that nature, or it could be accepting the risk if you think it makes sense from a business perspective.
Yeah, that makes sense. Let me ask you this for the because we talked about how people say early on, like you mentioned, people were logging on and using ChatGPT and actually putting in sensitive information in there. Is there anything that can be done at this point for that data that's already been there, especially if whether it's associated or not? And I guess are there any recommendations to maybe organizations out there who are kind of scared, like, oh man, maybe I screwed up and I did this thing wrong? Like, is there a way to kind of go back and look at things and figure out not just the right path forward to make sure whatever they did in the past doesn't bite them?
For organizations that have been using sensitive information in ChatGPT, there are a variety of different things that I could say. So first of all, that might be just business as usual. If you've got a ChatGPT enterprise subscription, if you are processing protected health information with a business associate agreement in place, that might be completely within your organizational guidelines and your risk appetite. Now, in kind of the middle case there, it may be that you have some sort of below enterprise subscription like ChatGPT Business. And in that case, it's not training on your data. It's not indefinitely retaining your data, but making sure that you are deleting chat logs as you no longer need them, I think is important, and using temporary chats to not retain something if you don't need it to be retained. Then kind of on the most risky side of things would be individuals who might be using personal accounts, might not even be logged in to ChatGPT. If they're not logged in, there's probably no way to recover that information because there's no way to attribute it back to you. And something I'd say on that note is you definitely want to avoid those types of situations by, I've heard some security practitioners say you shouldn't log in and you should try to anonymize what you're doing by changing names and things like that. And I would advise strongly against that. I wouldn't rely on kind of home-baked approaches. I would rely on the controls that the vendor agrees to contractually over some sort of homemade anonymization approach.
Yeah, it just sounds like you're skirting the rules when you do that to me. Like it's like, well, if they can't trace it back to me and they don't know it and I anonymize it, then maybe it's okay. And I guess that's where I look at the future. And when I say there's going to be some kind of fallout, like, somebody at some Fortune 500 company use their personal one and, put in a bunch of financial data, and somebody down the road puts the right prompt in and is able to pull that data out because it's been trained. Or I don't know, is that even possible? Like, I know they're using it to train the data, but like, let's say I put in all of my personal information and let you train it. Does that now make it easy for anybody else to kind of, to be able to go grab that because the data's there?
Large language models aren't memorizing data precisely. They are creating a way to infer based on that information. With that said, if you take something like technical details, for example, that can, in a sense, inspire a large language model to reproduce that information or even expand upon it in a way that might be damaging to your business from a competitive perspective. I know that Amazon in particular reportedly was very concerned about that in early 2023 when ChatGPT was providing some very high caliber technical information about their internal infrastructure back to users who had not input that information to ChatGPT. So large language models aren't memorizing word for word information, but they are using it for future inference.
Yeah. So if you're anybody where pricing is, I think about manufacturing, managed services organizations, or anybody who's like dealing with like contracting on a regular basis and competitive bidding. If I prompt it out right, I'd be like, hey, what are most people in in this sector pricing out their widgets to win government contracts for? They might be able to kind of not reverse engineer, but again, like you said, they have that sort of frame of reference to kind of say, oh, well, here's what Lockheed Martin is doing.
There is an incentive issue with respect to companies like ChatGPT and Anthropic in that they really do want you to put sensitive, non-public information into their system so that they can train on it and make the product better. That's just what they want to do. And then conversely, companies don't want their employees to do that if it's being trained on, if it's being indefinitely retained, because it would bleed competitive advantage from the organization.
Yeah, for sure. So is this another one of those? I think I know the answer, but I'm going to ask anyway. But like you mentioned, it's between you and your provider. I mean, we are just beholden to whatever whatever Gen AI product we go to that says they're going to do the thing they say they're going to do, as far as not train on our data or whatnot. Right? There's I talk about third-party risk a lot, and it's very easy for me to go to my HVAC vendor and tell them they need to fill out the security questionnaire. Anthropic's not going to do that, just like Microsoft doesn't do that. They're like, here's our SOC 2, whatever, go away. So like, what kind of preventative measures can be taken for organizations that are dealing with these sort of larger than life organizations from an AI standpoint?
As with any third-party risk situation, you are going to be at least partly reliant on the representations of that vendor. There's unfortunately no way around it. The good news is, or the bad news is, that's just life. That's just how business works. You're always going to be reliant on some sort of third party. So there are things you can do from a security perspective. You can do vulnerability scans of their external network. You can work with the vendor to get them to agree to let you do penetration testing and red teaming. You can look at their security practices. Do they have a vulnerability disclosure program in place? Do they have a security.txt file in place? There are a lot of indicators that you can look at that you can continuously evaluate over time that are public information, and taking all those into account and then weighing them against the costs of doing something else is, in my opinion, the best approach.
Sure. Yeah, it's always that risk appetite, cost versus value. Is it worth it, kind of thing. Totally get that. You mentioned the ISO model earlier. What's the sort of foundation and all of that? How does that kind of walk us through what that addresses and looks like, and kind of how that approach is taken?
ISO 42001 is the international standard for building an AI management system, and it is a set of requirements for how you need to develop an AI risk management process, as well as a menu of technical controls which you need to at least evaluate as you are doing your risk assessment and risk treatment processes. So overall, it is a system for managing AI risk that is broad and not heavily prescriptive, but it does provide a standard against which you can be evaluated.
Gotcha. Now, it's ISO, so I assume it's something certifiable.
Yes, you can certify to ISO 42001. StackAware, my company, is 42001 certified, as are several of our clients.
Do we see that in the future becoming something that I would expect any company who has AI in their product to be looking to do that, much like they all do SOC 2 at this point, right?
I definitely think there's going to be an uptick in demand for ISO 42001 readiness and certification as companies become more concerned about, but also are more prevalently using artificial intelligence in their products, but as well as in their supply chain. So I definitely see a promising future for the standard.
Are you seeing organizations that have like lots of like state agencies are always the big one, right? So like there's certain requirements to be on contracts for the state or federal government. Are you starting to see or hearing anybody have those conversations about making that a requirement?
Specifically with respect to state and federal contracting, I have not seen any requirements to achieve ISO 42001 certification. With that said, interestingly enough, even though ISO is an international organization and is primarily associated with doing business in Europe and the Middle East and in Asia, interestingly enough, Colorado passed a law, the Colorado Artificial Intelligence Act, that specifically calls out adherence to and compliance with ISO 42001 as being an affirmative defense in certain circumstances if you are alleged to have violated that law. So I thought that was very interesting because we haven't seen that in Europe, but we have seen it in the United States. That law is on the books, and it is coming in force in less than 6 months.
That's great. Yeah, I mean, legally defensible, man. That's what it's all about a lot of times. And Colorado's on top of it. They're first on the data privacy thing too. And now with the AI stuff, it doesn't really surprise me at all. So Walter, this was great, man. A lot of awesome information from you. Appreciate that. If people want to find you out on the interwebs, where do they go?
Look me up on LinkedIn. I'm Walter Haydock. Give me a follow, and I post AI governance and security content every day.
Awesome. Thank you, Walter. Really appreciate your time, bud.
Thanks, Will.
Thanks for listening. Be sure to like and subscribe. Follow Will and the podcast on LinkedIn/Wil Klu. Visit Wil Klu ME for information on services he offers to help your cyber or tech business grow. Until next time, Synaculator.